Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Gainsight's Chief Strategist of Pulse Programs, Ruben Rabago.
Woo! All right. This next panel is going to be awesome. I guarantee it. I'd like to introduce the moderator of this panel, Kelly Capote. Please come on stage. She is, her official title is Superstar CSM. Seriously. Come on, Kelly.
All right. Who is fired up and ready to kick off the second half of our first day at Pulse 2018? Let's hear it. Woohoo! All right, well, you should be very excited as I have not one, but two very distinguished speakers here with me today to discuss a very hot topic, how to deliver a flawless executive business review. So let's go ahead and do some quick intros. First up, let's meet Mr. Chris McNamara. Awesome. All right, so Chris is a former management consultant, entrepreneur, and now customer success executive, and he's led a broad range of teams and organizations in thinking more deeply about how to better acquire, engage, and retain their target customers. As the VP of Customer Success at Glassdoor, Chris works with the teams responsible for enabling, delivering, and demonstrating values to Glassdoor's customers. Chris has a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of New South Wales and an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Let's give Chris a big, warm Pulse welcome. Awesome. All right, so in true Gainsight fashion, Chris, this is your first tough question of the session.
Let's do it.
Share with us a fun fact about yourself.
Yeah, well, one fun fact about me is that when I'm not helping our customers be successful, I love coaching. And I've been a Special Olympics volunteer coach for the last 10 years. And this is a photo of me with my local Special Olympics basketball team.
That's awesome. I love it. All right, you guys ready for our second awesome guest? All right, Laura Grendel, come on up. Woohoo! All right, a Minneapolis native, Laura serves as a Senior Director of Client Development at SAP Concur. She's led client-facing roles for the past 7 years at SAP Concur and has worked in sales and account management for the past 17 years. She's passionate about managing customer relationships to ultimately drive growth, profitability, and organization for the customer's business. So Laura, let's give her a heartfelt welcome. Woohoo! So Laura, you're not getting out of this. You have to share us your fun fact as well.
So I am the proud mom to a 17-year-old daughter, Catherine Grace, and she's pictured up there. That's us in Vail last summer. We love to travel and take advantage of the globe. So super happy to be here today. Thanks for having me, Kelly.
Awesome. All right, so let's take a seat. What to expect during the next 45 minutes. So I'll be your host. As we know, the executive business review is a CSM's highest profile activity, or one of them for sure, and it demands a unique level of focus. It can definitely be a make it or break it moment, and each EBR is anything but one size fits all. So we're going to try and cover some of the key criteria for today. So we'll start with what are some common pitfalls of EBRs. I think a lot of us may have been there in the room before. We'll discuss what is the EBR process, not really just an event, but thinking about the three key steps of really setting yourself up for success in the EBR. And then Chris and Laura will share 3 lessons learned with some really concrete examples of things that we're hoping you can take away and operationalize, within your own day-to-day activities. And then we'll make sure to leave some time at the end to open it up for Q&A from the audience. One quick housekeeping item, we will be using Slido to facilitate conversation and Q&A at the end. So make sure you have it open in your Pulse app or go to www.slido.com, #Pulse2018. All right, are you guys ready to get started? All right, so we're fully aware this is the first post-lunch session, so we're going to kick it off with some energy and engagement. So let's sit back and watch a quick scene that we may have it may hit a little bit too close to home for some of us. So Laura and Chris, let's take it away.
I am the bumbling CSM. Chris, it is so good to see you. I'm so excited for our executive business review today.
Great to see you too, Laura. Thanks for taking the time. Good to be here.
It's so good to see you. Where's Kelly?
Oh, Kelly, we don't need Kelly. We don't need Kelly. I'm kind of her right-hand man, so you know, her calendar's a disaster. Don't worry about Kelly. She's not going to come. Yeah, not a big deal.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
Oh, you know, let's just smash through this. We can get through it. Just you and I. I've got a Peloton class in about 30 minutes that I really need to make. So if we can just jump right in, I'm excited to hear what you've got to say.
Okay, I thought we had an hour on the calendar, Chris.
Oh, an hour? Really? Wow, I do not have an hour. There is no way I've got an hour. Yes, sorry.
Okay, well, let's start talking then. Let's just get to the document. Did you get the document I sent you?
Oh, there's a document?
Yes, there's a document. I sent it yesterday afternoon to you, Chris.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I have not reviewed the document. Let me just. You know what? I don't have my phone or my laptop with me either.
Okay. Well, let's just kind of get straight into it then with just this 30 minutes. Let's just get straight to page 175.
Okay.
And
Okay.
you'll see when you do get the document
Yes.
that our analytics that we've looked at, we are making phenomenal progress on utilization
Yes.
on a feature alpha. We're so proud. We are so excited to share this with you.
Okay. Feature alpha. What about Operation Theta?
Operation Theta?
Operation Theta. Laura, Theta. We're all about Operation Theta this quarter. Theta. It's the key. It's the key to our entire business. It's the center of our strategy. I'm all about Theta.
I'm really sorry, Chris. I didn't know that your whole focus had shifted to Theta.
It's okay. We're just about coming up on time now anyway. So look, I'm really happy with the work that you've done. Like, obviously very impressive. I'm going to relay this back to Kelly. I'm sure she's going to take it from there in terms of the renewal. So thank you so much for your work. I'm going to go jump on a bike.
All right, well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, let's give it up for him. Okay, so what do you guys think went wrong? We're actually going to open up to the audience. If you can open up Slido and go to the Ideas tab, quickly pop in a couple of things that you saw that resonate as common pitfalls that can happen during executive business reviews. We'll touch on them real quick, and then we'll dive into the content. All right. And I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely felt like that CSM in the room that's getting the blank stare, playing on the phones. So that's why we're here today, to give you some tips and tricks to prevent that situation from happening. All right, are we bringing up the Slido screen? Okay, so the number one, actually not knowing what should be included in an EBR agenda. That's a good one. What would you guys say about that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know something I think that's really important is getting that agenda out in advance, like a good few days, so the executives know what to come in and think about.
Yeah.
That's good. Not knowing what your customer actually cares about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not speaking their language. That's a good one. Confirming proper audience and not getting the executive sponsor in the meeting. Mm-hmm. Those are all things that we're going to talk about today. That's great. All right, so Laura, let's kick it off.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, when we think about the executive business review, we think about the event itself, the meeting. When in fact, really, the executive business review is a process with 3 core components, and each of those components is equally important. Be it it's the preparation, it's the delivery, the meeting itself, and what comes out of that meeting with the execution of all of the deliverables that you've discussed in your meeting. It's easy to think of it as just the meeting, but those 3 core components that each deserve equal time, arguably those bookends could even use more time than the meeting itself. We'll get into more detail on that in a bit, but really want to emphasize today that if you're thinking strategically about how you're going to most closely partner with your clients, you should really think about the executive business review as a process with 3 core components.
That's great. All right, so let's dive into 3 tips for a better EBR. Chris, you want to take us through number 1?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key lessons learned and one of the approaches that we like to take at Glassdoor within our CSM team is to begin with the end in mind. And we use an approach based on Franklin-Covey. I wonder how many folks in the room have actually used the Franklin-Covey methodology? Show of hands real quick. Yeah, a bunch of people. So for those who are not familiar with that approach, it's basically a methodology for improving your personal productivity, your effectiveness. And one of the quotes from Stephen Covey that really resonates with me and our team is that know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now, so that every step that you take along the way is in the right direction. And for us at Glassdoor, that really begins with a reflection on what are the concrete outcomes that you're seeking to achieve from the executive business review. And unless you have clarity on those outcomes, it's going to be very difficult to achieve success from that meeting. At Glassdoor, we orient that conversation very much around what we call client success criteria. So you heard from Nick earlier this morning that the way that CSMs are being measured is shifting away from generic metrics of performance towards measures that specifically align with the client agenda. And up on the slide here, you can see the way in which we approach setting the stage with our clients at Glassdoor. The way that you should think about success criteria is that these should be a concrete statement of how you will deliver value to the client. And in that regard, these should be goals which are specific. They should be measurable, they should be attainable, they should be relevant to your client, and they should be timely.
That's great. Laura, how about you? What do you think on this topic?
Yeah, when we're thinking about the preparation that it takes, you can see here, talking about the outcomes, thinking about the outcomes in advance of the meeting. It seems sort of funny to put this slide at this point, right? But really already thinking about that next meeting. And there is no better time to start thinking about that when you have the time and the attention of your key stakeholders and you're talking about those objectives and specifically how you're going to measure those, to have that accountability and buy-in that we're getting together again next month, next quarter. We're setting the date now. We're anchoring that conversation so that it's already an expectation with your client that this is something we're doing. This is an ongoing partnership. We have your promise for engagement, and you've established a true partnership for success.
That's great. All right, number 2.
Yeah, lesson number 2 is that sometimes less is more. And I've sat in a bunch of meetings with CSMs where the client has specifically asked for data. I need the data, show me the data, data. And the temptation, I think, is sometimes to give the client more data than they actually need. Because data is not the same as insight. And when a client asks for data, I think what they're actually asking for is insight. So one of the key questions to reflect on here as a CSM is, what does your client executive or the executives in the room really care about? And what are the key messages or the key takeaways that you would want to communicate to this client in the limited number of minutes that you're going to have with them? The more time that your CSM team invests in producing endless charts and analyses, which are nice, but don't necessarily tie to those core underlying messages and the insights that you want to deliver, the more time you're detracting from actually influencing the way the client thinks about your relationship with them. One of the key aspects of being able to communicate those messages effectively is a concept that I first learned as a management consultant. And these concepts are referred to horizontal logic and vertical logic, and I'll touch on those in a moment. But first, to this question about what do executives really care about, as an executive myself, and Laura as an executive, some of the things that come to mind for us are the following. Firstly, how does the performance that we are talking about actually compare to what we set out to do? Like, is the level of attainment aligned with the success criteria that we have laid out for our partnership and working with this organization. Secondly, how does this compare to what we did last time? So executives are often interested in the trend in performance over time. Linked to that, I think executives are very interested to understand how they compare to other organizations. And to the extent that you can provide insight around competitor benchmarking, that is always going to be an interesting and compelling conversation for an executive. And then lastly, any executive is going to not only want to understand current performance, but the reasons for that, that performance, particularly where there's an issue of underperformance. So if we outperformed or underperformed, what are the key drivers of that result? And what are the implications? What should I know about that so that I can take away and take action?
Thanks, Chris. Laura, let's hear your viewpoint on this item.
Absolutely. So it's critically important that when we do go and we're starting to plan our executive business review, that we've thought for ourselves, what is my point of view when I go into this meeting? What am I going to do to move things forward with my client? What's going to be most beneficial to them? But also what's going to be important to my company too? How do we create some mutually beneficial goals and objectives that we can become aligned to? I might even need to challenge the client when I'm thinking about that. But we're going to have to be able to get the client's attention to understand what is meaningful and impactful to them. And when you do propose your strategy, why should they care about it? And I encourage you to ask yourselves and your teams these questions as you go into preparation, and maybe even do some mock EBRs with one another so that you can hash out, like, have I really answered the question? Is this really going to be meaningful to them? Or am I just chucking out the data and hoping that they grab onto it? And so understanding, what is the benefit, and as we've talked time and again about, do we have the smart objectives around it to ensure that we have a clear, crisp understanding before we even get to the doorstep about how we're going to get there and deliver upon those goals. So when you are building that strategy, it's critical that you're engaging the client in building it. So you're coming in with your point of view, what you've already established as the key core components that you're bringing forward. And then in collaboration with your client, you're building that strategy to help get their buy-in to what it is that you're working on together, that you have their full buy-in and their partnership and mutual accountability to making sure it comes true. So we're doing this by looking at the data, looking at the benchmarking, calculating the potential ROI, understanding any risks associated with what you are proposing. Sometimes you might have phenomenal alignment with your client in terms of what the point of view and the strategy is that you're proposing. Alternatively, it might be some moments that you're going to challenge the client's perspective and help them reframe the way in which they think about their very own business. But remembering that as a loyalist servant to them, that you have visibility to loads of ways in which other organizations are doing this. And so you have the visibility that they really long for, and you can be that trusted advisor to them when you come on site and partner with them with your point of view to develop that strategy.
Yeah, Laura, I really like the piece of tell me how we might do that, not just tell me I need to do something, but give me some concrete next steps to actually take action. That's awesome. All right, so I think we're all really excited to hear more about horizontal and vertical logic, Chris. So explain to us a little bit more about what it is, and we'll share an example.
Horizontal and vertical logic is obviously incredibly exciting, so I can see why.
Totally. I mean, this slide.
Waiting with anticipation for this particular slide. One of the things that Nick asked Laura and I to do in today's presentation was try to come up with some really practical suggestions for you around how to increase the effectiveness of your EBRs. And I think this is one really practical thing that everyone can reflect on. So horizontal logic is basically the concept that the flow of content in your document should follow a logical progression and basically form a coherent narrative. And this is a concept that is very prominent for any professional services company, for any management consulting company. Vertical logic is the idea that within a specific page in your document, the material that you're presenting should align to basically the message that you want to deliver. And if you worked for McKinsey & Company or Boston Consulting Group or Bain, you would always be told that you should only seek to deliver one message per page. And I think that that is a really simple and powerful reminder that as human beings, we can only process a certain amount of data. So if you show me a chart or a table and you're trying to draw out 4 or 5 different kind of messages, the chances are that's not really going to connect, and I'm not going to retain that information. So sometimes, again, less is more. So let's work through a quick example of what horizontal logic could look like. Glassdoor is a recruiting company, and so I wanted to share with you an example of a document that we might share with one of our clients. And so this slide begins, over the last year, the number of applicants for your jobs on Glassdoor has been increasing. The average cost per application is well below other benchmarks. But we're only sponsoring 30% of your jobs today. So we believe that there's an opportunity to expand the coverage of your roles with Glassdoor and reduce your hiring costs. So this is an example of a narrative where we're communicating a specific story to the client, we're supporting expansion with this particular account, and the progression of the content in the flow, it's logical, it's intuitive. We're trying to only deliver a single message per page, and this is the core of what I was referring to in terms of horizontal and vertical logic.
Yeah, I love that. I know we actually did a training session at Gainsight all on like storytelling. It was a very similar concept, so definitely resonates. All right, number 3, no substitute for preparation.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes from Muhammad Ali is that the fight is won or lost far away from witnesses, behind the lines, in the gym, and out there on the road long before I dance under those lights. And basically, what I think Ali is getting at is that there's no substitute for hard work or preparation, and this is something that's directly within your control. So you should never walk into an EBR and be unprepared for that conversation, and if you do, you really only have yourself to blame. And I think to a degree, the success of the EBR is the product of what has happened over the prior 6 months and the prior 12 months. You shouldn't, as a CSM, expect to arrive and achieve success in that moment unless you've invested the hard work in that relationship and creating value for the client over that prior period of time. So part of what we look to do at Glassdoor is ensure that we're preparing for those conversations in the right way, that we've got very clear alignment on goals within our team and with the client, that we are allocating responsibilities within our team very effectively, that we're reaching out to the right business sponsors in those client organizations to ensure that you don't end up in the situation that Laura and I role-played earlier, where the decision maker is not in the room. And putting yourself in the shoes of the client to consider what kind of the Franklin Covey methodology would describe as yellow lights. Like, what are the potential concerns? What are the likely questions that they're going to have related to the content that you're presenting to them? The more that you can anticipate those, the better prepared you'll be for the conversation. Lastly, one other thing that we like to do at Glassdoor is try to understand the sentiment of the customer before you get into the room. So if the customer is feeling good, that's great, because you know that you can orient your narrative more around the opportunities. If your customer is not feeling good, then it should be a different conversation. Like, don't walk into the EBR expecting that this is going to be a conversation about growth opportunity if they're not feeling good. And so one way that we try to assess that before walking into the room is by implementing NPS surveys with our clients every quarter. So once a quarter on the client calendar, our clients will receive a simple NPS survey that basically asks them to assess the nature of their experience with Glassdoor. And we time that survey in a way that helps us to have a read on sentiment before the CSM steps into the room.
That's great. Laura, I think you have some good tactical items to share with us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. As we shared, Nick had asked us to give all of you some takeaways, and so hopefully this is helpful to you, particularly around Gainsight and looking at your C360 and understanding so many of the dynamics of the client. It could be easy to have a super busy week and not do the proper preparation for your meeting and fully understanding your client's profile. So we encourage you to look at what does their current contract look like? Our organization Concur came into existence in the early 90s. We do have clients who have some sweetheart pricing, and so when that conversation comes up, it's important to know that. It's important to know the discount levels. It's important to know what were the terms of the agreement. Is there a parent company coming into the picture for your account? Understand the utilization and adoption metrics. Have there been any changes in the organizations that would suggest some key players have changed and there's a need for new training to increase utilization? Understanding when the contract's coming up for renewal and what shifts may be taking place in their organization that would affect the status of your contract. What sort of CTAs are open? And this one can be a bit tricky. From my experience at our organization, our customer engagement executives are really the relationship advisors with the account. They're not technical support. And some of you might relate to this in so much as your client might ask things of you that truly are not to their benefit nor clearly to yours, but you find yourselves in a reactive situation. So critically important that as you do this and engage in this manner, that you keep it a business conversation, but give them the opportunity to get with the right resources to address any concerns they might have, but help them understand that you are their partner in business. And that'll help you carve out more time for yourself to be better prepared for these meetings and conduct the kind of executive business reviews that your leadership really wants you to conduct. Close not one opportunities. Where has your organization historically engaged with this client on opportunities to help them with what they have from you, with their services, potentially services that would really help them improve their business today? Well, how did it get missed? How did the evaluation go? Are the same individuals who would be key stakeholders, are they still in place? Is this a good time to reopen that conversation? Or as Chris said, is it not? Is it probably best to leave that, acknowledge it, and make it as a personal goal for yourself? I would like to shore up what our gaps in our relationship are right now so that I know in 3 or 6 months I can come back and re-engage in this conversation around my close not one opportunities. And certainly understanding that leveraging everything from LinkedIn to the industry news, PR, to fully understand what's going on in your client's industry, what kind of trends are important to them. For example, for my team, we have a solid chunk of oil and gas clients in Texas. They've certainly seen a downturn in recent years, but to them, operational efficiency is top of mind. We also have clients out here in Silicon Valley, totally different conversation. A lot of them are on a fast growth trajectory, and their willingness to spend and invest, they do it in a different way because it has a different impact to them. So understanding what's going to be meaningful to your client and what's going to help them become successful is key. And as you're going through your 360 checklist, you want to be sure that you've identified those things. And ultimately, as we witnessed today, making sure that you have the right attendees in the room, and do not hesitate to reschedule if you can't get those attendees. I recently had a knife through the heart when I had a conversation with a CFO who said if I was engaged sooner, we'd be keeping this service. I came to the scene a little too late when it had fallen out, and it was really a huge bummer. So when you can keep services top of mind, and we'll get to that in a moment too, how do we keep in line with our C-suite to ensure that those connections are, once they're established, that they're maintained, but that you have the right people in the room that are going to be able to influence and impact your relationship, and that you're not single-threaded, that you do have the appropriate contacts to ensure that the relationship is healthy and continues to move forward.
That's great. Hopefully these are some good examples that you can all walk away with and start thinking about as you begin to prepare for your own EBRs. All right, so I think this is the big one, and we wanted to make sure we definitely touched on this one today. How do you actually make sure that you get the E to the EBR? What do you think, Lara?
So, it's a funny thing. So often, when a contract goes through, the key stakeholders and executives are very often involved, right? By show of hands, how easy is it for you to engage a sales executive in that crossover conversation to ensure you get the download of all the sales information? Who has a great, easy time with that? Oh, all right. I understand. So it is critically, especially if you live in an organization where sales is separate from the client sales organization, critically important to make those relationships with the sales executives in your organization to understand and looking who is the contract signer. If you and your teams don't do it today, I encourage you to go through every contract, get that signature, and mark it as a key contact in Gainsight. That's critically important that you know who signed that contract. Are they still with the organization? If not, who is their successor? And who are the influencers in their organizational chart, be it just political or actual? Who's going to help make those decisions and influence whether or not you get a renewal? And as it relates to the sales individual, once you have a new client come over the door, you have to be besties with that sales executive and help them understand that. Now, I understand that you're kind of a love them and leave them kind of person, but the thing is that I'm going to treat this client really well, and once we do, you're going to have a referral. And you're going to get more deals because I'm going to help you maintain these great contacts at the account. And so maintaining those relationships at the executive level is critical, and the first step to that is at the point of sale, ensuring that you grab on and get a hold of the regional sales executive so that you ensure that relationship has continuity. Beyond that, we encourage you, what we do at Concur is we have newbie nurture campaigns. So our marketing team works with us, and it's automatically loaded so that executives get ongoing support from us and understand what it is, what's the ROI in working with us. You can do that depending upon the size of your organization, you can do it at a more grassroots level. Additionally, it might make sense for you to make a match for an executive within your organization. If I'm one of Chris's team members, I might have Chris be assigned to a certain executive at another organization, or even other folks, a CMO or whomever at Glassdoor, to make sure that there's an alignment there. And make it in such a way that it's personal to that person, right? So from my perspective, I might link Mark Nelson, our CTO, to a CTO at another organization to make sure that their personas, that they're on the same page, and things that are top of mind for them will come through in collaboration, and that we are continually articulating the value of our solution to that client. That they understand on a regular basis that they're getting the industry benchmarks, and not just data, but insights that'll help them improve their business and help them reach their specific and unique goals. And that will be different for a CMO and a CTO and a CEO and a COO and a CCO. It's going to be different to each and every one of them, and doing that preparation and homework is critical.
Yeah, I particularly like the executive outreach program and having that program governance. I've personally found that if we have executives linked up with their executives and there's a regular cadence call happening, it's much more likely that we're going to have those executives present at the EBR. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a good one. Anything you'd add, Chris?
I think the only thing I would add is that I would encourage you to think about building relationships with these executives over time. Like, if you treat this as a transactional situation, then that is only going to minimize the likelihood that the executive attends. In order to have that executive take time out of their day, prioritize that event over many other events, there needs to be a compelling agenda, there needs to be an existing relationship. Like, if I'm asked to attend a meeting, chances are that the first questions I'm going to ask is, okay, what's the agenda and who's attending? Like, can someone else attend on my behalf? And if those things don't align to what my priorities are, then chances are I'm not going to attend that meeting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Laura and Chris, we've aligned on objectives, we brought some powerful insights, and we've done a whole lot of planning, and we've had a really good and successful EBR. So then what happens?
So then it's time to execute, right? Taking our agreed upon action items from the meeting, the second step in the process of an EBR, and understanding that we've discussed and set our goals, we've documented those goals, we already have our calendar date with the attendees for our next visit, right? And we've also identified we're on the same page in terms of how are we going to measure these goals. We've talked that through. So we have a specific mutually agreed upon action plan, and we have a way to measure our results to ensure that by the next time we get together, we will know that this is what success looks like. And if in the course of that meeting, we have our pre-meeting to understand what the POV is, the point of view we're driving to develop our strategy, if by virtue of our conversation with our account, if things have shifted, we can be agile. And so in that meeting, we can adjust and pivot if we need to. But by the time that the event, the second part of this, wraps up, when we go to execute, we should be on the same page and be using the same yardstick to understand what success looks like.
Yeah. All right, so measure progress and value delivered. I don't know who this CSM is on this sheet, but she seems to really have it together with a concrete action plan. In all seriousness, this is one example, going back to what we shared, of really giving you guys some tactical takeaways. I think really not just having a verbal plan, but really having a concrete plan in place with key next steps, and to measure that and mark progress and demonstrate the value delivered as you go, and use those EBRs as kind of a milestone to report back out on them, really makes it kind of a journey where you're constantly continuing to drive full value realization for your customer. And this is just one example of how we do it in Gainsight via success plans, to really mark out what are the key overarching objectives and what are the very specific tasks underneath of them that we need to do. And it could be across various different players cross-functionally, but how are we going to come together and ultimately commit on what we just aligned with and get that across the finish line. So that's great. And when we do that, we can have a pretty powerful impact, right? So let's hear a pretty cool success story.
Yeah, so this morning we heard Nick talk about, his parents want him to do something important with his life. And my parents kind of wanted the same thing. And actually when I was younger, I spent time in India and I had the beautiful opportunity of meeting Mother Teresa. And I thought I was going to go out and save the world. And I did a volunteer time on the south side of Chicago after college. And altruism is just a deep part of who I am, and trying to give back. So here I find myself in corporate America, and some days, on the one hand, you tell yourself, well, I concur, we're doing a lot, but maybe we're not saving the world. So maybe I shouldn't lose too much sleep when we're having a rough day. But truly, I just had the honor of being on an executive business review at our client in Seattle, World Vision. And to sit there and talk to them about making goals and objectives around what they're doing, having their key stakeholders in the room, and understanding the way in which we drive operational efficiency and help making the lives of their individuals out in the field that are providing clean water, giving educational opportunities to children who would not have them, the more money we can save them and the more efficiency we can give them, we are in fact doing something to make the world better. So I encourage you to think about that in your business. Sometimes it might not seem abundantly apparent about the way in which you're making lives run smoother and making people's lives better, but I guarantee you each and every one of you is. And I encourage you to think about that, because it's really a meaningful part of your work when you can help yourself see that. When we can do a really successful executive business review, it makes all the difference.
Brings it back to purpose, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so let's open it up for Q&A. We have a few minutes left, and then we'll tie it all back together with a great takeaway slide for you. So open up Slido, pop them in if you haven't yet, and we'll go from top to bottom. All right, number one, do you use standard templates for business review and have templates loaded in Gainsight? I'll let you start, and then I can elaborate on the Gainsight piece.
Yeah. I'm happy to take a swing at this one. I think there are some trade-offs here around using standard templates versus creating bespoke documents every single time. And what we would do at Glassdoor is we create a structure. We do have a standard template, but then we provide CSMs with the freedom to augment that template with bespoke analysis that really speaks to the particular concerns of each individual client. I just sat in a session with BCG who shared that standardized workflows, standardized processes, templates are associated with more consistent outcomes, better retention outcomes, better growth outcomes. So I think that the answer is not to try and invent the wheel every single meeting that you walk into with a client, but at the same time, I think you need to afford some flexibility to really afford your CSM to speak to the specific nature of the client agenda and their success criteria.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think it's good to have a common framework or methodology that you're using and a skeleton. But if you are truly aligning to those outcomes and speaking their language, sometimes that may be different from customer to customer, but you're still using the same foundation to get there. I also think segmentation will come into play in this too. If you're very high touch, it may have a little bit more customization than if you're managing a long tail of customers.
Totally true.
All right, number 2, it seems like quarterly business reviews can be too frequent. How often do you recommend conducting an EBR? Laura, do you want to take this one?
Certainly. It really does depend on the client, the size, the investment level for your organization, and what really makes sense. It does make sense to have a recommended framework within your organization for the level of touch for any client. We have clients for whom that is absolutely expected that we would conduct an executive business review quarterly. Alternatively, we have clients that want to meet with us once a year, and we have great relationships on both sides, but it really depends on you, the client, the investment level.
Absolutely. All right, next up, part of our EBRs included product roadmap conversations. This is a good question. Should this be kept as a separate meeting? Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. And I think my answer would be it depends. I think it depends on the nature of the client and their specific concerns. My initial inclination would be to say that if your EBR is like a 1-hour meeting, then it's going to be difficult to speak to the product roadmap in a detailed way and talk to everything else that you want to speak to that client about as it relates to their success criteria and demonstrating the value of your products and services with that client. But without kind of specifically knowing those client relationships, it's hard for me to say. What do you think, Laura?
I absolutely agree. It really depends on the life cycle where your client is sitting. I think that has a big part. Some of the clients that are newer are maybe not as familiar with your organization. They might appreciate it, but more than anything, when you're preparing for the executive business review and have a pre-call to review the set agenda and stakeholders and make sure that we're all on the same page, this could be a question. I want to confirm with you, we have presently the product roadmap on our agenda for this meeting. Would it make sense to continue to have that conversation when we have the right players in the room to have that conversation, and then take it from there?
Yeah, I like checking for alignment, like get their thoughts. One thing that we've also done, I don't know if you've ever done it, but if you feel like the product roadmap needs to take place within that conversation, we've even broken it into 2 parts, letting the executives know maybe they stay for the first 45 minutes or hour where we're talking more strategic items, and then depending on the other personas that may be participating, use the second half of that to get a little bit more tactical, go deeper in product, things like that, and that's worked and been effective for us as well. Okay, this is a fun one. How do you tell a client they are performing worse than their competition?
Yeah, I guess this is really a data visualization exercise. In general, I would say an executive wants to know that they're performing worse than their competitor if that's the case, and that's actually a meaningful insight. Like, to the extent that you are not delivering that insight and you're trying to kind of conceal that information, then I think we're not necessarily delivering the value that you could be delivering to the executive. So then I think it's a question of how do you position that data, how do you present it, and what benchmarks are you showing? And perhaps it's a combination of showing how that organization has tracked over time, and hopefully they're showing certain levels of improvement on a number of factors, but also highlighting that there's further room for improvement. Like the way that it's easy to choose a benchmark that is both like better than or worse than like any organization. So how you present that data to actually deliver insights to the client is very critical. So I would just think about, are there ways that you can present perhaps a multitude of different benchmarks or data points to share, I guess, progress as well as opportunity?
Yeah, it's all in the messaging and potentially even sharing how they were able to get there, like the storytelling piece.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to dovetail on that. One of the things that I've done with clients is if they're in a challenging state and not quite on where we'd like to see them, in comparison to their competition, is to set a goal as, I'd really like to see you as a featured guest next year at our client event for us at Fusion. It's an annual client event. I'd love to have you come up on stage and talk about how right now we were here, and next year at this time, this is where we're going to be. And by the way, you get a free pass, if you come and your team can come. And, it sets a goal for them so that they can start to visualize what that looks like, and their engagement level and their accountability cranks up.
Yeah, you put the positive spin on it.
Right.
I like it. Awesome. Well, I think we're out of time for questions, unfortunately, but we did want to leave one key learnings and takeaway slide for you. So in summary, the executive business review is truly a process. We really can't think of it as a one-time event. You need to plan for your success. You need to deliver with a very clear point of view and a strategy to actually make that happen. And last but not least, make sure that you need to execute and have a really concrete plan on what those clear objectives and next steps look like. So we hope your next EBR, you'll walk out feeling like this. All right. Thank you all for your time today. It's been fun.